everyone, and welcome to this first edition of Parade's Concierge Desk. We at Parade specialise in delivering class-defining event concierge services, and our North Star is to offer frictionless experience for our clients and their guests. Our obsession is guest experience, and we're fascinated by how other businesses and brands use experience to build connections with their clients and customers. So Concierge Desk is our opportunity for us to speak to others that feel about experience the same way we do, and to share some thoughts with our network. Throughout the series, we'll be having conversations with people who specialize in guest experience and asking them to give us insights about how and why they use it and why it's important. So this week, I'm absolutely delighted to have as our guest, Rosanna Covacich, founder and creative director of the Place Atelier. Rosanna is a visionary who believes that aesthetics transcend the visual. They are felt, they're lived, and they're remembered. She believes that aesthetics profoundly influence how people experience spaces and brands. She's got experience of developing new hospitality ventures for Soho House & Co., transforming workplace environments for BMW, and crafting unique experiences in Iceland. Rosanna has a very impressive resume. And Rosanna, I'm fascinated to get into this conversation to hear how you interpret and use experience in your work. But first of all, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I think you've said a lot about me, but I think in terms of my passion for designing experience, and beyond that, my passion for beauty and aesthetics has led me to found the Place Atelier. And essentially what we're about is we look at two things. We look at envisioning places, and we also look at market positioning. But significantly, a lot of what we do starts with designing an experience, the experiential concept. So that is a starting place, and which obviously led us to come together and talk some more about experience design.
So designing that experience is obviously your North Star. And what I'm fascinated with for this series is how different businesses interpret guest experience. Who is the guest for each different type of business? So for you and for your clients, who is that guest? Who are you designing that experience for? And how do you interpret guest experience?
Right. So I think there's semantics in the word guest.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, it's the person and the role that that person plays when you associate it with the brand. So when you're working with hospitality and hotels, they'll talk about the guest. Sometimes when you're working, say, in more the product space, it's the customer or the audience. But essentially what it is how is that person going to be interacting with and engaging with our business and with our brand, and how can we really elevate and delight them to come back for more and to be loyal and to talk about us. So that's how I define the guest. In terms of thinking about designing experiences or coming up with concepts, my route in typically varies with the category that you work with. So but above all of that, and essentially, the experience is an orchestration or a composition of elements that you go through when you're imagining the experience. So more recently, I've been doing that mainly in the built environment space. So you're looking at elements like the ambience, the atmosphere of the space. You're looking at the interior architecture and the interior design, the physical aspects of the space. You can go into the sensory details, the smells, the sounds, and then also there's the operational component, which is around the service and the staff and how they deliver that service, because of course, you know, they become the ambassadors for the brand. So they're really the face for the business of brand. So there's a very delicate interplay across several elements particularly when you're looking at the concept stage.
And that was actually going to be my next question. So
Yeah.
clearly you get involved in projects at different stages along the development. At what stage do your clients tend to start thinking about this experience piece? You mentioned that part of that might be interior architecture. Part of it might be the feeling that the destination or the place wants to communicate to visitors. So when does experience come into the conversation?
Oh, look, it dips in and out. So if you're looking at, say, a development process, the experience ideally should start pre-design sign-off, so the architectural or the design of the built environment, because that gives you an opportunity to influence the spatial design in an ideal world. Sometimes it doesn't, with a lot of creative projects, you come in at different stages, often when a client encounters a challenge or an issue. So it really depends. Also, experience design, sometimes you can come into the equation quite soon before the launch of a place, where you dip in at that stage. Other times it can be when a client is getting, it's not confused, but needs a little help in terms of how to interpret the design codes into a physical experience, and how to interpret design codes, for example, into the creation of amenities, into the creation of cultural programming. So you come in at that stage as well. So it really is kind of, you can drop in at various stages.
But I think what you're saying is that the earlier the better, because that means that you can weave experience into literally the fabric of the building.
Completely. Yeah.
And why is that experience piece important to your clients?
I think it's extremely important, particularly for clients that are increasingly valuing aesthetics. And the reason why, I mean, if you step out of just talking about physical places, um, let's face it, products are becoming quite comparable across brands. So the reason why experience is becoming important is it's that distinctive layer that you can introduce over and above the product, so that it gives a brand much more of a personality, much more opportunities to engage its target audience or its guest or its customer along different, what we'd call touch points or different interactions. So I think that's why it's important. I think creating feelings of delight or feelings of pleasure, which ultimately is what most humans are wanting to experience, is incredibly important. It's almost like magic dust, but there's absolutely a halo effect to that, because of course we both know we've experienced them. We've had some wonderful experiences ourselves, but I can relay one recently. Now, I'm not a Dior buyer, but I walked into the Dior flagship in Paris, and I hate to say it, but I would have spent about 4 hours there. The people on the team, they didn't interfere at all. They didn't pressurize you to buy, but it was just an incredible atmosphere to be in. And of course, I walked out with a bag. I don't know how, but I did. But it was all because of that experience. And that bag almost becomes a souvenir of that experience. So every time I look at it, I recall that day. And every time I go back to Paris, I want to go back because I have this anticipation that's built, and that story around that particular day. So I think that's what happens with a lot of guests, clients, and that's why they want to return and they want to re-engage with that place or that product.
I love that. I love that example. And what um, what could have happened during that experience for you for it not to go so well? Because I think it's probably quite a fine line, right, between a great experience and a really bad experience. So what can you identify could have happened during those touch points along that customer journey that you had that could have turned it in completely the other way?
I think it all comes down, in my mind, beyond the product. It comes down to the service
Hmm.
and to the team on the floor, which were like, I sat back that day in the cafe and I watched the people, and then I spoke to the sales associates, and I'm like, how do you get it so right? And I think what could have gone wrong would have been moments where you felt you were hurried along. You know, it didn't matter to them whether you were going to purchase or not, but simply you were there and they were absolutely passionate
Yeah.
about the brand and the product. And also, I think what's interesting is not only what happens in that period of time that you're in that place and the beauty and the aesthetics of that experience, you know, and as we talk about experiences, the moments before and after. So, I mean, I can go back from personal experience. I'm not going to go too much into big case studies in our conversations. But that day, another item that I bought, there was one piece missing. And I thought, how am I going to call them and say, actually, it wasn't, you know, given to me? Are they going to believe me or not? And I called them, I'm like, you know, this is a really sensitive conversation, but I opened the box and half of it wasn't there. And they're like, not a problem at all. Come back the next day. It was all ready.
Yeah.
So it's just the delicate touches where they thought about what could go wrong
Yeah.
as well as what could go right. And it wasn't so much of an issue. You know, I think that that seamlessness and that personal attention is so important.
And that's clearly inspired you. I talk the whole time in my work, my daily life, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you do, about emotional connections and how to build emotional connections between client and brand. And clearly that has succeeded in the case of Dior to Rosanna. How do you use that kind of emotional connection in your working life when you're talking to your clients? And how do they, what importance do they put on building those emotional connections as part of the project that you deliver for them?
Oh, in amongst the project team?
Yeah. Well, no, I think that kind of emotional connection between the the project, whatever it is, the development, the building, the
Yeah.
hotel, and their clients. How do they use that experience, guest experience, member experience, whatever it is, to
Yeah.
build those emotional connections?
Well, it's more so how I think about it. So if I'm brought on to look at the experience, say for example through the journey, then I would look at what emotional response you want to evoke at significant interactions along that journey, call it touch points. So if you're looking at hotels, you know, when you're looking at hotels or hospitality spaces, there's a huge focus about the warm kind of hello and the fond farewell. I mean, they're key moments, right? And then there's certain other moments in that journey during your stay, which are very important, very significant in creating that connections, others not so much. So you really need to understand, draw out what the significant moments are and what emotional response you want at that moment. So it could be something as simple as, oh, I've arrived, I feel safe, I've been welcomed, and I can be myself and I can express myself in this space, in this room. It could be moments that aren't that elaborate, they could be really understated. There could be moments of silence,
Yeah.
which I find really interesting. So it's really, yeah, so it's quite delicate. And then at that moment, so for some clients, I will look at it as almost like a musical score. So I'll be thinking about pace and rhythm and amplification and silence. For other clients, I'd look at the sensory composition. So, if you talk about silence, it could be very low soundscapes, maybe not strong scents, So it really is an interplay of a number of delicate elements, and it does depend on um, the degree of passion a client has with exploring these aesthetic elements in great detail.
Interesting. It's so
Yeah.
interesting hearing you speak, because what you're effectively saying, I think, is that at each step of the journey, the aim is to make the customer feel comfortable. I
Well, yeah, to a certain extent. I think that's the almost like the most utilitarian need is to make them feel,
or maybe I mean at ease rather than comfortable.
in order to open up,
Yeah,
yeah, and enjoy
yeah.
this. Yeah, I think that's quite important to start with, and then you start delighting them, and then you can start adding some theater if you like,
Yeah.
an involvement in that. But yeah, you do need to make them feel at ease to start with.
And that Dior story was very much about, you feeling at ease to begin with, not feeling rushed in a beautiful environment, and then being in a position when you're open to having that person offer you their service, and the surprise, the delight, and all of those
Yeah.
amazing things. And I think about, well, how does that translate to you? You approach all of these things, as always, Rosanna, in a much more scientific way. And I'm kind of thinking, oh, how does that translate to our guest journey for the event concierge projects that we undertake? And it's right. Actually, our main aim is to get the guests there in a frictionless way so that they're comfortable, that they're at ease, and then they'll be receptive to everything that the brand has planned for them.
Yeah.
Um, so we've talked about, how that experience piece is translated, how it's used. How have you seen your clients focus more on experience over the last 5 or so years? And I'm asking quite a leading question, because our business exists because because the kind of the attitude towards experience has changed significantly over the last 5 years. So I'm interested to know, is that the same shift in your world? And if so, how does that manifest itself?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much is my world. I think the whole dedication to experience now has become increasingly important for some of the reasons I mentioned before, but also I think clients that um, have basically work with more discerning clientele and have prestigious products realize that to still operate in the luxury space, experience becomes important, because we know, and it's been spoken about for quite some time now, the way that people are no longer really obtaining value from just purchasing a product. It has to be a product plus something. So I think a very interesting example of that is if you look at Rolls-Royce, obviously targeting the type of clientele that we're familiar with, and an incredibly beautiful heritage product, beautifully designed. But Rolls-Royce recognized the product alone, and we know what's happening with the car industry. But they realized that that wasn't enough for that brand. And so they introduced Rolls-Royce Whispers, which in fact is kind of a membership for the Rolls-Royce clients and the aficionados. So similar to what you do, they've added on a premium lifestyle concierge service, but also a way to connect these international lovers of Rolls-Royce. Very, very exclusive. I don't think everyone's invited. So I think that that is really symbolic of how important experience is and how it's come into the equation as a consideration of, say, a brand extension
Um,
for clients.
Yeah, I mean, something else we always talk about as well is that kind of engagement with client between transaction, and automotives is a great example of that because I mean, some people I suppose do go out and buy a new car every week or every month, but most people don't. And so how the automotive industry can stay at the top of the mind of their best customers,
Yeah.
always a consideration.
Yeah.
Um, the
If
time is
time is going, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say time is ticking on, and I just wanted to ask you. Uh, uh, I'm interested to look to the future,
Sure.
and with a particular focus, I think, on kind of land development, of placemaking, of creating spaces. How do you think the experience element is going to change over the next few years? Look into your crystal ball.
Okay, so you're talking particularly like third places, cultural
Yeah.
spaces, that kind of thing, membership. Um, yeah. So I'm calling it an aesthetic awakening in a way. I think that overall experience is going to be a significant differentiator for any category. I think that we've spoken a lot about membership clubs. I'm looking, say, if you're looking at that category and the futures of that category, like, I mean, membership clubs are springing up left, right, and center here in London, in Milan, in New York, wherever. They seem to be in vogue at the moment. So I feel that if you're looking at that space now, if I can give it a critique, it's becoming, for me, in my mind, there's two things happening in that space. One, certain investors in membership clubs are basically taking an F&B offer or revenue stream and wrapping it up in a beautiful bow and presenting it as a membership proposition. I think that is a bit thin as an offer with longevity. I also think that in terms of experiences in that setting, I'm wondering whether the term membership has resonance these days, particularly with the Gen Z. So I've been obviously talking to a lot of that market. I've worked in membership clubs as a view, and it's almost getting a little bit of a whiff about it. So they're saying like it implies we're paying. So what do we get
Yeah.
if we pay essentially a subscription? Whereas I'm sensing just through the conversations I'm having, so no rigorous research, it's more like I want to be in a place where I can contribute also. And again, that's all about human connection. So I think in the past, where it was obviously a badge of social proof and social status, where you were constantly reassured because you're looking left and right and you're in the right room, I think now it's becoming more about, what are we contributing? Is there something deeper than
Interesting.
a cultural offer? So I think that is going to be happening in the membership space. I think we spoke last week, didn't we, about we're feeling that the membership bubble, it will burst, and we saw news come out about, unfortunately, about Albright going into receivership. I think we could be seeing a lot more of that happening. I think there's a difference though when you're looking at memberships which are founder owned. I think in that model and in that scenario, there's more of a long-term view and an understanding that community that has that stickiness and magic takes a long time to build. So I'd say that's where it's going in membership.
So that's very interesting. So the original kind of members clubs were founded because the experience was being in a room full of friends or friends that you haven't met yet, right? People that you know you're going to have something in common with. And you're saying that because members clubs have kind of become in certain aspects an F&B outlet that excludes 99.9% of the population from coming in because they don't become a member. So that experience piece is no longer about the kind of social network that you're joining. It needs to be much more about content that is created by the club to keep the members entertained.
Yeah, I think so. I think another interesting area for me too, and I mean, it did start to happen many years ago, is this convergence of fashion and hospitality. So we did have the Armani hotels and the Versace hotels, that version of it. But now what I'm finding particularly interesting, and back to the point about product versus experience, what is more important? I mean, you're seeing LMVH now investing significantly in hospitality and hotels. They acquired Belmont Group. I think it was back in 2019, which I think is really interesting, but also super, super smart because they're inserting themselves into the lifestyles of their clientele.
Yeah.
You know, they're present where these ideal clients are. So it's opening up that world, you know, their world
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
clients. So I think that that's super interesting.
I think the trick of LVMH is to be a part of every part of their client's life, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Rosanna, thank you so much. It's been so interesting. I have no doubt that this conversation will continue anyway,
Yeah.
over a delicious cocktail somewhere very soon.
No, I never say no.
But thanks so much. Thanks for being a part of our first concierge desk. And
Pleasure.
we'll speak to you very soon. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
Bye for
Thanks.
now.
Bye bye.